What if the biggest problem with willpower is not that we are weak, lazy, or unmotivated, but that we misunderstand how self-control actually works? That is the central idea behind The Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. This book takes a topic that most people treat like a moral issue and turns it into something much more useful, a science-based skill. Most of us think about willpower only when we are failing. We think about it when we procrastinate, when we overspend, when we eat what we said we would not eat, when we skip the workout, when we stay up too late, or when we go back to habits we promised to leave behind. In those moments, it feels personal. It feels like a character flaw. But McGonigal argues that self-control is not just about personality. It is tied to biology, stress, attention, sleep, emotion, environment, and the stories we tell ourselves. The book introduces a very useful way to think about willpower. There is the power to do what is hard but important. There is the power to stop what is tempting but harmful. And there is the power to remember what truly matters. In other words, real self-control is not only about saying no. It is also about saying yes to the right things and staying connected to your deeper goals. This framing matters because many people reduce self-discipline to pure resistance. They try to force themselves through life with constant pressure. But that approach often breaks down. The harder life gets, the less energy they have to keep fighting themselves. McGonigal shows that willpower works better when you understand it, train it, and support it. So this is not a book about becoming robotic. It is not about perfect habits, perfect discipline, or never feeling temptation again. It is about learning why your mind works the way it does, why your brain chases short-term comfort even when it hurts your long-term future, and how you can gently but powerfully retrain that pattern. If you have ever felt trapped between what you want now and what you want most, this book is for you. It offers a more compassionate and effective path. And the first lesson is this: willpower is not a rare gift given to a few exceptional people. It is a capacity that can be strengthened, protected, and practiced. One of the most memorable ideas in the book is that willpower has 3 parts. McGonigal describes them as I will not, and I want. This is a simple framework, but it explains a lot. I will is the power to do what matters, even when it is difficult. It is the force that helps you sit down and work when you feel distracted. It helps you exercise when you would rather stay in bed. It helps you have the hard conversation, follow through on a plan, or keep a promise to yourself. I will not is the power to resist impulses that pull you away from your goals. It is the pause before reacting. It is the ability to stop yourself from opening the app, buying the thing, eating the extra portion, or saying something you will regret. It protects the future from the pressure of the present. Then there is I want, which may be the most important of all. This is the ability to remember what you truly care about. Not what feels good for 5 minutes, but what matters in the bigger picture. Health, peace, financial freedom, meaningful work, better relationships, a stronger version of yourself. This third power matters because temptation often wins when we lose sight of what matters. In the moment, the brain narrows its focus. It starts treating the immediate reward as if it is the most important thing in the world. The snack feels urgent. The distraction feels harmless. The purchase feels justified. The delay feels reasonable. But when we reconnect with our real priorities, the spell weakens. This means self-control is not just about discipline. It is about awareness. You do not always need more force. Sometimes you need more clarity. You need a way to bring your long-term values back into the room before you make the decision. A practical lesson here is to define your personal I want. What is the bigger goal behind the habit you are trying to change? Do not stop at surface answers. If you want to save money, why? If you want to wake up earlier, why? If you want to stop procrastinating, why? The stronger and more emotionally real your answer becomes, the more power it has. People often fail because they focus too much on what they are trying to avoid and not enough on what they are trying to build. The brain responds better when there is something meaningful ahead. So instead of only saying, I need to stop wasting time, you might say, I am building a focused life. Instead of, I need to stop eating junk, you might say, I want energy, health, and self-respect. The deeper lesson is that self-control improves when your actions are connected to identity and purpose. When your goals are emotionally alive, willpower becomes less of a fight and more of a decision. A major part of the book explains that the human brain is not one unified decision-maker. It contains different systems with different priorities, and these systems often compete with each other. One part of the brain is reactive, emotional, fast, and reward-driven. It wants relief, pleasure, novelty, safety, and immediate gratification. This system is not evil. It is ancient and useful. It helps us survive, react quickly, and seek what feels rewarding. Another part of the brain is reflective, future-focused, and deliberate. It can plan, compare consequences, hold long-term goals in mind, and guide behavior with intention. This is the system we rely on when we make commitments and try to live according to values instead of impulses. When people talk about lacking willpower, what they often mean is that the reactive system took over before the reflective system had enough time or energy to step in. This is why bad decisions often happen when we are tired, stressed, distracted, hungry, emotional, or rushed. Under those conditions, the brain defaults to what is easiest and most immediately rewarding. This is an important insight because it changes how we think about failure. Instead of saying, I am hopeless, we can ask better questions. What state was I in? What triggered the impulse? Was I exhausted? Was I stressed? Was the temptation too easy to reach? Did I forget my real goal in the moment? Once you see self-control as a brain state issue, not just a personality issue, new solutions become possible. You stop relying only on motivation and start working on conditions. You create routines. You reduce triggers. You rest more. You build pauses into your day. You make good choices easier and bad choices harder. This also explains why small changes can create big improvements. If you put your phone in another room while working, you are not becoming a different person overnight. You are simply reducing the advantage of the impulsive brain. If you prepare healthy meals in advance, you are helping your reflective brain win when energy is low. If you automate savings, you are protecting your future self from emotional spending. The message here is empowering. You do not need to wait until your brain becomes perfect. You can design your life so the better choice becomes more likely. Self-control is not only internal strength. It is also external structure. McGonigal helps us understand that we are not broken because we feel temptation. We are human. But when we learn how our brain works, we can stop being surprised by our patterns and start shaping them. One of the most practical lessons in the Willpower Instinct is that stress weakens self-control. This is huge because many people try to improve discipline without addressing the exact thing that is draining it every day. When you are stressed, your brain and body shift into survival mode. The nervous system prepares for immediate action. In that state, the mind becomes more reactive, more impulsive, and more focused on short-term relief. This makes perfect sense from a survival perspective, but it creates serious problems in modern life, where many of our biggest goals require patience, planning, restraint, and consistency. Think about what happens after a hard day. You are more likely to overeat, scroll for too long, skip important work, snap at people, or spend money emotionally. Not because you suddenly stopped caring, but because stress narrowed your focus to one question: what will make me feel better right now? This explains why so many people sabotage themselves when life gets intense. They assume that in stressful periods, they simply need to push harder. But often the smarter move is to calm the system first. Self-control grows in a body and brain that feel safe enough to pause. McGonigal highlights the value of what could be called the pause response. Instead of reacting automatically, you slow down your breathing, ground yourself, and re-engage the reflective brain. Even a short pause can interrupt the momentum of an impulse. A useful practical takeaway is that your first self-discipline strategy should not always be force. Sometimes it should be regulation. Before asking, "How do I resist this?" ask, "What state am I in right now?" If your body is agitated and your mind is racing, you are already at a disadvantage. This means stress reduction is not separate from productivity, health, or discipline. It is part of them. Sleep, breathing, walking, quiet, recovery, and emotional awareness are not luxuries. They are support systems for better decisions. A lot of people live with constant low-level stress and wonder why they cannot stay consistent. The book gives a compassionate answer. You may not be failing because you lack ambition. You may be fighting every battle with a drained nervous system. Once you understand this, the goal changes. You stop trying to act like a machine. You start trying to become steadier. And paradoxically, that is often what makes discipline stronger. Many people believe guilt and self-criticism will keep them accountable. They think being hard on themselves will make them improve faster. But McGonigal shows that shame often backfires. When people slip, they often respond with harsh self-judgment. They say things like, "I always ruin everything," "I have no discipline," "I knew I would fail," or "I might as well give up now." This emotional spiral does not strengthen willpower. It weakens it. Why? Because shame creates stress, and stress increases the desire for comfort. So the same person who feels bad about overeating may eat more to escape the feeling. The person who procrastinated may avoid work even more because the guilt feels overwhelming. The person who broke a habit may decide the day is ruined and keep going in the wrong direction. This is one of the most important mindset shifts in the book. A setback is not dangerous because of the mistake itself. It becomes dangerous when the mistake turns into a story about identity. The moment you turn one lapse into proof that you are weak, your motivation collapses. McGonigal encourages self-compassion, not as a soft excuse, but as a smarter strategy. When you respond to failure with honesty and kindness, you recover faster. You learn instead of spiraling. You ask what happened, what triggered it, and what you can do differently next time. This does not mean lowering standards. It means separating behavior from identity. You can say, "That choice did not help me," without saying, "I am the kind of person who never changes." One statement creates learning. The other creates helplessness. This is especially valuable for anyone trying to break long-standing habits. Change is rarely perfectly linear. There will be off days, emotional days, and old patterns that resurface. If every slip becomes a personal attack, the process becomes exhausting. But if every slip becomes information, progress becomes possible. A very practical way to apply this is to prepare your recovery script before you need it. Decide in advance how you will talk to yourself after a setback. Something like, "I slipped, but this is not the end. I want to understand what happened and get back on track now." That kind of response protects momentum. The deeper truth is powerful. People do not usually change because they hate themselves enough. They change because they care enough to keep going. Self-respect is often a stronger engine than self-punishment. A big part of self-control struggles comes from how the brain responds to reward. McGonigal explains that the brain does not just enjoy rewards. It learns to chase them. It starts anticipating them, craving them, and exaggerating how much satisfaction they will bring. This creates a trap. We confuse wanting with happiness. We assume that because something feels urgent, it must also be deeply rewarding. But often, the pleasure is brief, the consequences last longer, and the experience does not satisfy us nearly as much as we imagined. This is why temptation can feel so powerful before we give in and strangely underwhelming afterward. The brain gets activated by the promise of reward. It pushes us toward the thing. It makes the desire feel important. But once the reward is consumed, the magic fades quickly. That pattern appears everywhere. Social media, online shopping, sugar, gambling, checking notifications, binge watching, constant novelty. The craving is real, but the fulfillment is often shallow. This matters because many people assume they are making rational choices in those moments. But often they are responding to a reward loop that has been trained through repetition. The cue appears, the craving rises, the action happens, and the brain learns to expect it again. To interrupt this loop, awareness is key. McGonigal suggests paying attention not just to the urge, but to the actual experience that follows. Did the thing truly satisfy you? Did it help? Did it move you toward the life you want? Or did it simply relieve tension for a moment and leave you with less energy, less time, or more regret? When you honestly study temptation, it starts losing its false glamour. You begin to see that many impulses are loud, not meaningful. They're intense, not wise. A practical technique here is urge surfing. Instead of obeying the craving immediately, you watch it. You notice how it rises, peaks, and changes. You breathe and observe without rushing to act. This teaches you that an urge is a state, not a command. It can pass. Another powerful move is to make the long-term cost more visible and the short-term reward less magical. If you always spend impulsively online, add friction. Delay the purchase. Remove stored payment details. Write down the real reason you want financial control. If you always reach for distraction when work gets hard, identify the emotional trigger and create a healthier break. The lesson is not that pleasure is bad. The lesson is that we often become controlled by rewards we have never properly examined. Freedom begins when we stop automatically believing every craving. At the heart of willpower is the ability to choose a larger future reward over a smaller immediate one. This is delayed gratification, and it shapes almost every area of life. The person who studies instead of scrolling is choosing delayed gratification. The person who saves money instead of impulse buying is choosing delayed gratification. The person who exercises, eats with intention, builds a business, practices a skill, or repairs a relationship is often making present sacrifices for future benefit. But this does not happen automatically. The future is abstract. The present is vivid. The present has flavor, emotion, urgency, and comfort. The future often feels distant, blurry, and easy to ignore. That is why one of the smartest strategies is to make the future feel more real. McGonigal encourages us to build a stronger connection with our future selves. Instead of treating the future version of you like a stranger who will somehow handle everything later, start seeing that person as you. The choices you make today are not disappearing. They are being handed directly to that future self. This shift changes behavior. When the future becomes emotionally real, small decisions matter more. Saving money becomes an act of care. Working now becomes a gift to your later peace. Resting well becomes a way to support tomorrow's clarity. The future is no longer an idea. It becomes a relationship. A practical way to use this is to ask, what would tomorrow's version of me thank me for? Or, what kind of week am I creating with this choice? Those questions stretch your awareness beyond the moment. Another useful tactic is pre-commitment. Decide important actions in advance, before temptation arrives. Schedule the workout. Prepare the food. Block the work session. Automate the transfer. Set the app limits. Remove the option to renegotiate with yourself every time emotion changes. Successful people are not always better at resisting temptation in the moment. Often they are better at shaping the moment before it happens. The deeper message is hopeful. Delayed gratification is not only about sacrifice. It is about self-trust. Every time you choose the bigger goal over the smaller urge, you strengthen the belief that you can rely on yourself. And that belief becomes one of the most valuable assets in life. McGonigal makes it clear that willpower is not just something you use in dramatic moments. It is shaped every day by habits and attention. What you repeatedly focus on, repeat, and reinforce starts becoming automatic. This means many self-control problems are not random. They are rehearsed. We have practiced distraction. practiced avoidance, practiced emotional eating, practiced overthinking, practiced giving in quickly. The good news is that the reverse is also true. We can practice focus, practice pausing, practice finishing, practice saying no, practice acting in alignment. One important point is that attention drives behavior. Whatever captures your mind starts shaping your actions. If your environment is filled with cues that trigger cravings and interruptions, your attention gets pulled away from your goals again and again. If your day begins in reaction mode, self-control gets weaker before the important work even begins. This is why mindful awareness matters so much. The ability to notice what is happening in your mind before you act is one of the strongest forms of self-control. You begin to catch the thought before the behavior. You see the excuse forming. You feel the stress rising. You notice the rationalization. That gap is where freedom lives. Identity also matters deeply. People tend to act in ways that match the story they believe about themselves. If you tell yourself, "I am terrible with money, I always quit, I have no focus, I am addicted to distraction," then those stories quietly guide behavior. But if you begin to reinforce a different identity, everything starts to shift. This does not mean fake positive thinking. It means choosing truthful, constructive identity statements based on the person you are becoming. I am learning to be consistent. I am someone who protects my attention. I am becoming a person who finishes what I start. I keep promises to myself more often now. The brain listens to repetition. What you practice and what you repeat as identities start feeding each other. A practical takeaway is to stop relying only on big emotional motivation. Build small, repeatable wins instead. One focused hour. One mindful pause. One resisted impulse. One planned action. These are not tiny. These are training reps for a new self. Over time, willpower becomes less about heroic effort and more about a life structured around awareness, repetition, and alignment. That is how change becomes sustainable. One of the most empowering ideas in the book is that willpower can be trained. It behaves in some ways like a muscle. It can become stronger through use, but it can also become tired when overworked and more effective when supported properly. This means the goal is not to demand perfection from yourself all day long. The goal is to train self-control intelligently. Start where you are. Build gradually. Protect recovery. McGonigal points to several ways to strengthen willpower. First is mindfulness. When you practice paying attention without immediately reacting, you improve the ability to notice urges, thoughts, and emotions without becoming controlled by them. Even a short daily mindfulness practice can improve self-awareness and response control. Second is sleep. Sleep deprivation weakens the parts of the brain involved in attention, planning, and impulse control. In simple terms, tired people make worse decisions. This is not laziness. It is biology. Better sleep often looks like better discipline because the brain has more capacity to choose well. Third is exercise. Physical movement helps regulate stress, improve mood, and support brain function. You do not need extreme workouts. Consistent movement improves your ability to manage yourself. Fourth is making hard choices smaller and more specific. Vague goals drain energy because they require constant decision-making. Clear rules save willpower. For example, I write from 8 to 9. I check messages after lunch. I buy only from a list. I stop eating at this time. Simple systems protect mental energy. Fifth is tracking patterns. If you know when and where your self-control tends to break down, you can prepare. Maybe your worst choices happen late at night, after conflict, during boredom, or when work feels uncertain. Awareness turns failure points into design opportunities. A critical detail here is not to overload yourself. Many people get inspired, try to change everything at once, burn out, and then feel defeated. The wiser approach is progressive training. Pick one area. Build consistency. Then expand. This is how real transformation happens. Not through one dramatic promise, but through repeated practice under realistic conditions. The beauty of this idea is that it gives people hope. You do not need to wait for a new personality. You can build a stronger relationship with yourself through training. And every time you practice choosing what matters over what is easy, you are strengthening that muscle. By the end of the Willpower Instinct, the idea of self-control looks very different from the way most people imagine it. It is not coldness. It is not self-hatred. It is not endless pressure. It is not the ability to suppress every desire and become perfectly disciplined. Real willpower is awareness in action. It is the ability to pause when the mind wants to rush. It is the strength to remember what matters when the moment gets loud. It is the skill of creating conditions where your better self has a real chance to lead. McGonigal gives us a more human view of change. She does not deny temptation, stress, emotion, or biological limits. She works with them. That is what makes the book powerful. It respects both science and struggle. The biggest lesson may be this: self-control improves when we stop treating ourselves like enemies. When we understand the brain, calm the body, reduce stress, notice our patterns, and reconnect with meaningful goals, discipline becomes more natural. So if you want to apply this book, start simple. Identify one area where you need stronger self-control. Define your real why. Notice your triggers. Reduce friction around the good habit and increase friction around the bad one. Practice pauses. Sleep more. Move your body. Talk to yourself with honesty, not cruelty. Build one repeatable win at a time. And remember that every act of willpower is more than one decision. It is a vote for the person you are becoming. It is a quiet statement that your future matters. It is proof that impulses do not have to define your life. The Willpower Instinct is ultimately not a book about restriction. It is a book about freedom. The freedom to act on what matters most, not just what feels strongest in the moment. The freedom to build trust in yourself. The freedom to stop living in reaction and start living with intention. That is the real instinct worth developing. Not the instinct to chase every urge, but the instinct to protect your values, your attention, your health, and your future. And the more you practice that, the more powerful your life becomes.